So, first of all, namaskar. So, the idea of this session, as I said from the very beginning, was that in the last series of sessions that we have, we were mostly involved, in general with theory. So, we were talking the Upanishads, we were doing mostly that kind of metaphysical, philosophical and theoretical studies. So, from the beginning of this session I said I want to make it a little more practical. So, I am happy that you are practicing yogasanas regularly, someone is teaching you and that is very important. So, the whole point is, while we can theoretically discuss exploring consciousness and so on, we are unfortunately equipped only, generally equipped only with our 5 senses as the instruments of perception. We do not have any other senses, and mostly so called material scientific experiments are based on what is visible through the senses. However, as we discussed a day before during the last session, there are so many elemental particles in this universe which actually can also not be seen through our 5 senses, which does not mean that they do not exist. There are other ways of looking at them. We discussed that in detail. Microorganisms can be seen with a microscope, which is an extension of our sight. Quantum units can be seen by the reactions. Nobody has seen quantum units. They can only be you could say they exist only because they react in the whatever field. So, it's what I am trying to say is that there are dimensions which are beyond the grasp or reach of the 5 sense organs. And the practice of yoga, when I say yoga, I am talking from a broad point of view, not just Ashtanga yoga or practice of asanas and pranayam, but the practice of yoga more from the point of view of dharana, dhyana and samadhi, the last parts of Ashtanga, is built up on the premise, and it has been proved by those who have practiced it, that there are other instruments of perception in the human system which are dormant and which can be activated, because with these we can go only beyond a certain point, we cannot go. So, there are other instruments of us. Since the subject is exploring consciousness, it is difficult for us with our limited capacities and our limited understanding and also our mental conditioning to go suddenly into exploring the ultimate consciousness. So, we have to move from the gross to the subtle, to the subtler, to the subtler, to the subtler, till we reach that part where it is entirely undefinable. But we can only move step by step, we cannot suddenly jump into this. So, therefore, all the practices, yoga tantras, yoga, meditation, everything included, the psychic practices, they are all meant to activate the dormant centers of perception in the human system. When this is done, then one begins to look beyond the 3-dimensional world. So, we have to activate our dormant centers of perception. So, that is the whole aim of the practice, and from the gross the mind has to be taken to subtler levels of perception. So, that from the 3-dimensional understanding we move on to, if there are other dimensions, 4th, 5th, there could be multiple dimensions from our point of view. They need not end at 4, it can be multiple, and then when you go to the end of it, you will see that pure consciousness is beyond the grasp of any dimension, but by then the mind would have become so fine and subtle that it is able to kind of grasp what is going on. when you read the Samadhi Pada, the chapter on Samadhi and the Kaivalya Pada of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, a lot of discussion is generated regarding this, that when the mind becomes subtle and quiet and completely rested, with no vrittis whatsoever, everything is at rest, at that point the mind cannot even be then considered to be what we think the mind normally is. There is only the Purusha there, consciousness. In fact, without chitta, the mind cannot even exist. As soon as all the chittas are gone, the mind is gone, then what is there? The awareness still exists, and that awareness is the awareness of the Purusha, which becomes self-aware of its existence, not anything outside. There is nothing outside actually. Since there is only the Purusha, it is called Kaivalya, the root being Kevala, only. So, this is the process of exploring. So, we have to go from gross to subtle. Now, we discussed also about some centers in the head, in the brain. I have talked about the pineal gland and the pituitary and so on. We had a discussion on that. So, let us not go there. Now, yoga, the practice of yoga is a very practical, systematic, step-by-step process. However, we need to follow the dietary restrictions, we need to follow the yama niyamas to the best extent possible, which means to keep a quiet mind and not to get too much involved in too many things and lead a simple life and so on, which I do not want to go back to that. These are the yama niyamas. If you go back to the Yoga Sutras, you will see all the yama niyamas. I am not saying that we can practice 100% perfectly. We can try our best and keep moving. As we advance, hopefully, we will be able to do it better. That is my understanding, because suddenly to wait for all the yama niyamas to become perfect, to start practicing the next step would be waiting for, I do not know, maybe next life. So, we should start working on it, and as it improves and as we go along, things will begin to change. Our perception begins to change, and then when our perception begins to change, we decide, okay, so it is better to be this way. So, that is what it is. So, we were discussing asanas, which is one of the steps. The most important thing about asanas is, as I said earlier, they are not just physical exercises or to develop your muscles or no. Of course, they are immune boosters, they improve your immunity and so on, but apart from that, they are in some way, they influence the endocrine system, the ductless glands in the human body, starting from the ones up above in the brain to those which are below, solar plexus and down, sacral plexus and so on. There are many glands like adrenal gland, thyroid gland, up there is the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Now, all the head down and leg up postures improve the circulation in the brain. When they improve the circulation in the brain, they automatically give a little more life and energy to the ductless glands which are in the brain, pituitary, pineal and so on. And we discussed yesterday also in the last session how they have an intimate connection with our moods. When I meditate and when I say I feel so good, Patanjali is of the opinion that it is a chemical process in which he does not use the word chemical process, but that serotonin and dopamine, which are the feel good factors in our system, when the little more of that flows into the blood, so you feel very nice. Now, that is not a spiritual experience, but it is a stepping stone, because when you feel very nice, then the mind becomes quiet and calm and the vrittis almost subside. When they subside, then you move towards the higher level of consciousness. So, this is a stepping stone, it is like a tarmac from which you take off. It also helps if you practice what is called sarvatra samabuddhaya, which means under all conditions you decide I am not going to be perturbed. whatever happens, happens, but I am not going to. If I get perturbed, I won't be able to solve the problem. So, I am not going to. So, that also helps in maintaining the quietness of mind and also encourage the ductless glands to give out their respective hormones into the bloodstream. So, that it is a two-way process. With the mind, I invoke it, and because of it, the mind becomes calmer again. So, it is a two-way process. So, okay, that is one part of it. The other is, while lot of research is going on now, luckily, with the brain, not much research is going on with the spine and its connection to the psychic centers. If you notice in any anatomy book, the spinal cord is merely a continuation of the brain stuff, what is in the brain inside, and it goes right up to the bottom of the spine. While a lot of work has been done on the brain, there still remains a lot to be done, which again can be experimentally done on the centers in the spine. Now, these centers in the spine also correspond to the plexuses. And if you look at anatomy and physiology, Gray's anatomy, you will see that wherever the yoga tantras say there is a center or a chakra or a padma, there from two sides of the sympathetic nervous system a cluster of nerves comes and joins together in front. This is called a plexus. You look at all the chakras, you will find a plexus corresponding to that. So, now what probably anatomists and physiologists are not discussing is that the mind by thought is able to influence these centers. This has not been experimented upon. Therefore, in the science of Yoga Tantra, it is not expressed openly or discussed in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but it is discussed in other yogic texts like the Yoga Pradipika and so on. Goraksha Shataka, Yoga Pradipika, Shiva Samhita, all it has been discussed that there is a channel in the spine which corresponds to the spinal cord, and the bottommost center is the Muladhara, and the highest center where it joins, where it continues and becomes the cerebrum, or from the cerebrum it like a tail it goes behind. So, the head part is the part where the Sahasrara, the 1000-petaled lotus is. Now, fortunately for us now, as I discussed earlier, we have instruments in labs which can, the electrodes can be fitted onto our brain. I am saying is not enough, they should also be fitted onto the spine, the spinal cord, and the reactions can be seen, the signals and the wavelengths that vary when a person is entering into deep meditation. This is a very important aspect of the research that one needs to do to explore consciousness. Please remember, you cannot suddenly explore the ultimate consciousness, you can go only from gross to subtle slowly. This is the yogic method. There is a school of thought like the Dzogchen which believes that you can suddenly come upon it. So, therefore, let me discuss this. So, from the lowest center, which is just behind our reproductive organs, in the just above the perineum, is what is known as the Muladhara. Now, the word is very interesting. Mula Adhara means root foundation. It is the root or the foundation from which this whole setup comes. Now, the yogis believe that our awareness, our awareness in the Muladhara is in the level of the earth, Prithvi, solid. And therefore, our awareness in that part is to do with the physical world, with Prakriti, with the physical world, with the solid world of 3 dimensions. It is to do with sex also, and it is also to do with physical reproduction, because when the prana flows from that center downwards into the reproductive organs, a new human being is created, physical human being. through the act of sex, a new human being is created. So, 1 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 3 and many. Now, this creative, physically, biologically creative aspect is from the Muladhara, rests from the Muladhara, starts from the Muladhara. The yogic argument is that this creative energy, which goes to form a physical human being, not all the time but occasionally, can be controlled and turned around so that it becomes psychically and spiritually creative. Now what happens? Here a physical being is created normally, biologically. When this happens, when this awareness is lifted from the Muladhara onwards, upwards, then another kind of creativity takes place, which is the psychic creative being, and then beyond that the spiritual creative being. That means it creates a non-physical advanced human out of this physically based human being. This is called turning rajas. Rajas is the word used to indicate energy, movement. Rajas to ojas. Ojas meaning spiritual energy. So, the one who was physical, when his awareness is guided through the Shushumna, which is the central channel, to each center which is subtler than the one which is at the end, this person undergoes a rebirth, a change. And when it reaches Sahasrara, you have completely become a new being. Now, this is the meaning of being twice born, Dwija. And when you get a Upanayanam is performed and the Janu is put, you are a Dwija, twice born. Now, twice born in the physical sense means you are entering into a spiritual field. But from the yogi's point of view, actually a new birth takes place into the spirit when the physical is totally sublimated. A new being is born. So, therefore, this process starts with asanas. You see this. Suppose you are doing a head down asana. Provided you don't have high blood pressure, don't do it if you have high blood pressure. What happens? This whole process is reversed. The energies that normally flow this way are now flowing this way because your position is like that. Okay. Now, yogic anatomy physiology also understands, also believes that in our system there are innumerable channels where the energy passes through, innumerable channels. They have some number, but I think the number is insignificant, many. Out of this, only 3 nadis or channels are important for us, for the yogi, to ascend from the gross to the subtle and so on and so on, subtler and subtler. And of these, the 3 are most important. 1, the Ida nadi on the left, 2, the Pingala nadi on the right, and the Shushumna nadi in the center. Now, normally the prana flows erratically through these centers. Not so much through the Shushumna, hardly flows through the Shushumna, but through Ida and Pingala it is kind of erratic. There is no systematic, there is no rhythm to it. Just rhythm enough for us to physically survive and be mentally as stable as we possibly can, but not beyond that. Now, the yogis say that this prana can be controlled and made to flow through the Ida and Pingala in a proper balanced manner. Now, this balanced manner meaning that it is not erratic. When this happens, when these are balanced, then automatically the channel called the Shushumna clears up. And when it clears up, one is able to lift one's awareness from the gross to the subtle. Now, there are symbols in each of these centers to show how one is subtler than the other in ascension, upwards. Now as I said, the Muladhara is the lowest part, is called Prakriti. It is represented by a square, which is a two-dimensional rendering of a three-dimensional cube. Cube in Latin. Kaaba is also an Arabic word derived from cube, meaning square, on the earth only, Prakriti. Now just the center above that is called the Swadhisthana. Swadhisthana. The Swadhisthana is the tattva there, this is Prakriti. That one is apas, which means what? From solid to liquid. It need not necessarily mean water. Apas tattva means liquid, it does not mean water. Although generally it is used for water, but and it is represented by a crescent moon. Now the crescent moon, some religions have just come to these two levels and stopped with the square and the crescent, finished, nothing about that. Some teachings, we need to but move. So the crescent is Soma, the moon. You will see it in Durga's head, you will see it in Shiva's head, and all the symbology of the literature, you will see it everywhere. Now the moon is also connected in some way to imagination. We say the moon. In fact, when imagination runs out of control, people say they are lunatics. I mean, Luna is the moon. When it ticks, then we are in trouble. But you can also use it for a purpose if you control. So controlled imagination is a very potent weapon. In fact, there is no yoga siddhi which does not use controlled imagination. It is only when it goes out of control that we are troubled. So the next step, when the consciousness, when the awareness is raised from solid to the liquid, which means subtler. Swadhisthana also happens to be the yogic center from where the yogi, we are not coming there yet, project himself out of this body. The Shushma Sharira, the subtle body. All this requires a proof, but I am just giving you the theory anyway. So from the Swadhisthana, now the awareness has moved from physical to subtle pottery level. Now, if it has to go further up or go to subtler realms, then it needs the help of Agni, fire, combustion. Like water is heated to make vapor, it is similarly. So the next center in this whole setup, the next Padma or the next chakra, which is called a Manipura, it is somewhere around the solar plexus area, and the element is fire, Agni, ignition, Agni, Igni. Igni and Agni are from the same root, ignition. So turn the key, so like that is represented by fire, red color, and it has some sounds which we will discuss afterwards. So when your attention and awareness is lifted to that, then you have come to the principle of fire, combustion. It also burns down all that is gross and leaves the subtle behind. And the next center therefore, which is the Anahat, this one in the center of the chest, the tattva there is Vayu, air, which means the awareness has shifted from the gross earth to that which is like air. But the color is like the sky, blue sky. Now further the awareness shifts and becomes subtler, and it reaches the throat center. When I say throat center, actually it is at the spine, but now this is represented as Akasha. Now what is Akasha? When the awareness has come from solid to liquid to vapor through Agni and then reached Akasha. Akasha, the definition in Sankhya is the primordial undifferentiated stuff from which this whole universe has come through differentiation, which means it is where the energy is moving at a particular wavelength, and it is generally calm and quiet. It is when there are ruffles in that and the frequencies change that the energy becomes grosser and grosser and grosser, and then becomes the visible earth, what you can see, feel, hear, and so on. So, this is what has happened from the Akash down to Prakriti. So, the reverse process is what we are trying to do in yoga, to take it back from where it has landed to where it came from through Prithvi, Apas, Agni, Vayu and Akasha. Now, beyond Akasha, what is there is that which cannot be compared or explained in the visible world. It is beyond the dimension, the 3-dimensional or even the 4th dimension. So, that is the Ajna. So, when it comes to this level in the medulla oblongata, in the back and in the front, what is called the third eye, there the awareness has come to a point which is way beyond any of the subtle understandings that we have, way beyond, even beyond Akasha, where the mind is so purified that it almost perceives the entire universe as one, almost. There is still a division. As it ascends to the higher level of Sahasrara, then there is only one, there is nothing, there are no dualities, everything is settled and the consciousness is seen as a pulsating, all pervading, endless stretch, which also happens to be our own inner self. This is very interesting because in the Ishavasya Upanishad, the last few slokas, last third, one before the last, no, second before the last, it says that great supreme being that I see before me, Hiranmayena patrena apasyapi hitam mukham, please remove that golden dish from your face so that I can see you face to face, you who are the truth. And then he said that truth is none other than me. Soham asmi, I am that truth. So finally, when the mind becomes so subtle and beyond all grossness and moves through different multi-dimensional understanding, it finally comes to the state where it knows that this entire universe is consciousness and I am not different from it in my true essence. This is the aim of all the exploration that has happened in the Upanishadic, Yogic, Sankhyan and Vedantic knowledge. This is the aim. Now, we have to now link it with our ordinary world and how to go about it. So, therefore, my suggestion, my idea is that we should get hold of a serious practitioner or a couple of serious practitioners. Actually, this experiment once happened, but it suddenly fizzled out. I don't know for what reason. There was a Kashmiri Pandit whose name was Gopikrishna, Pandit Gopikrishna. Pandit Gopikrishna did not do any much of yogic practice or anything. Now, there are explanations why some people get it fast and some people do not get, we will go to that maybe later. But he was taught by another Pandit in Kashmir who was a yogi to meditate. No other centers were given to him. He was asked to meditate on the top of his head here and a little inside on the center. So, he used to meditate in that center. You will see in his biography, you read Pandit Gopikrishna. He used to every day for 40 years, because he got the experience of his expansion of consciousness very late in life. 40 years he practiced fixing his attention here, inside. He was asked to imagine a flame, small tiny flame in the mid brain and meditate on it. So, I do not know whether he was given a mantra or which, I do not know. So, he did this dutifully for 40 years without fail, every day twice, and when he had time even otherwise. One day something happened to him which he could not even explain, because by the time the person who gave him this practice had gone, he felt a fire come up his body and it was so burning hot that his skin began to feel like it is going to burn off. Now, I would put it to non-systematic, uncontrolled practice. Suddenly something happened to him and the guide was not there too, and he felt flames bursting forth from his system, especially on this side. You must remember that this is the Pingala, which is the center for heat plus, and this is the cool, the moon center, and this is the sun center. For him it was the sun. And then the fire went into his spine and people thought he was going to die because he couldn't eat, he was vomiting, he was unconscious for a long time, many days, and then he came back. When he came back, it had stabilized. So, now the energy was flowing through the spine. Now, I have seen a case of this kind of practice of a sadhu who had happened, and he was almost like going crazy because the heat was uncontrollable and he was going mad. So, luckily somebody brought him to my teacher, Maheshwarnath Babaji. She told him the process is very simple, go and take a dip in the Ganga and the cold water, come back and lie down on your right side. So, for 2 days he was not allowed to move, he was lying down on his right side. He was not hungry, he couldn't eat nothing, he vomited whatever he. And the third day he became normal. Why? Because in yoga, in the yogic science of pranayam, the breath that goes through the right pingala is called the sun breath, solar breath. And the breath that goes through the left, which is the ida, is called the lunar breath. This is the cooling breath and this is the heating breath. What probably had happened to our men is that the energy was travelling only through the pingala for a while. Now, the pingala is the heating element. If this happens to anybody, you will notice that their right nostril is fully open, but the left is closed. Now, how to open the left so that the ida begins to operate, the cool breath, is to lie down on the right side. When you lie down on the right side, after 5-10 minutes automatically, this is can be experimented. Even if you have sinus, you can experiment it, forget about the kundalini. You lie down on the right side, in 5 minutes the breath gets more through the left nostril, and then you shut this and then the breath is going only through the left nostril. You feel cool, absolutely cool, even in summer. So, in Pandit Gopikrishna's case, it somehow automatically got stabilized. When he came back and he started talking about this energy which ascended from his spine and went up, and the various capacities he developed, he also believed that even individual cells in the body are affected by this when it happens, and there is a new cell created. Experiment. So, what he did was, he started something in, I think in Srinagar, called the Kundalini Institute. And batches of people were brought and they started practicing, and then they tried their EEGs, electroencephalographs, and some research work. I do not know where it is buried or gone now because it does not exist anymore. So, I am proposing that people who are involved in scientific studies and like IIT and so on, we should start working together. Not me, anybody, any yogis who really meditate and go deep into meditation, by trying to measure their EEG first to start with, and also measuring their brain scans. and looking at the brain scans and see how the pictures change when you go into a deep meditative stage. Now, with these scans in place, you cannot fake meditation. You can't say I am deeply in meditation because you can see the difference out there. You may not see, others can see it, right. So, if this is done, I am 100% sure there will be major changes happening in the patterns, in the EEGs and everything, which is a pointer that the mind is ascending from the gross to the subtler level of consciousness, and one is entering the portal at least of universal consciousness. Okay. So, that is something to be done in future. Let us get back to this. Now, the science of pranayam. So, we moved off from the asana to the pranayam level. Pranayam, as we explained just now, is the science of breath, but the breath is linked very intimately to the prana, the life energy. So, the first step of pranayam is to stabilize the breath, that the prana that flows through the Ida Pingala. When it is balanced, then the Shushumna opens and the prana is made to ascend on the Shushumna. A few other points about pranayam. Our state of mind is very well reflected in our breathing patterns. This is a physiological fact. You are very angry, your breathing is erratic and very fast. You are working hard physically, then also it is very hard. You are emotionally aroused, yes, the breathing becomes very fast. Sexually aroused, your breathing becomes very fast, your rhythm increases. In fact, your heartbeat also increases, which is why people who get angry every now and then are likely to have more heart problems than those who do not. Why? Because the breathing rhythm increases, the blood flow suddenly rushes to the brain, hemorrhages are possible, all these things. So, the Basaveshwara, one of the founders of the Lingayat movement in Karnataka, said very nicely, when you get angry with somebody, nothing is happening to the other fellow, you are burning your own house. You know what I mean? It is accompanied by a lot of problems that can be caused to you in your physical body itself. Okay, that apart. So, our mood is reflected in our rhythm of breathing, right. So, the yogis, the rishis thought, if our mood alters the rhythm of breathing, the pattern of breathing, can the mood be changed by changing the pattern of the breath? So, from there came the science of pranayam, and it is very simple. When your breathing is very soft and quiet, suppose you are listening to beautiful music, then your mind is also very, very quiet. Now, one way is what is taught as vipassana. Vipassana probably was the only pranayam that Buddha taught, practice, apart from talking about nirvana and so on. And this is watching your breath. Actually, vipassana means awareness, being aware of your breath. But in yoga, it is also linked to slightly controlling your breath, not only watching your breath, so that the breathing rhythm can be slowed down. If you give complete attention to your breath, and if the breathing rhythm slows down, automatically number of thoughts will reduce in the mind, and the mind also stay. As we discussed earlier, the tarmac from which to take off to the higher levels of consciousness is a quiet mind, undistracted mind, with no vrittis ruffling its surface. And this pranayam, which is watching the breath and softly breathing in and out, helps to bring this about. So, it is very simple. See, another thing to note, the most important nutrition for us is breath. Now we know it with COVID. What is the main thing that is not available? Oxygen cylinders. breathing. You can't breathe without oxygen. It's life and death. From the embryo in the womb till we die, it's going on. When it stops, nobody can do anything, it's gone. It's such an, you can live without food for some time. You can live without water also for some time. Without breath, how long can we hold? Half a minute? That's it. If you try to hold more than that, you're dead. Unless you are a yogi who doesn't need to breathe. I mean, that we will come to later. So, I'm not saying you shouldn't stop breathing, but and this is such an important nutrition for us, most important, but we hardly give any attention to it. We give attention to other things, but not the breath. I am saying that give some attention to the breath. Poor chap. It is your life. It is your life. So how to do that? Be aware of your breathing. As you inhale, be aware that you are inhaling. And as you exhale, be aware that you are exhaling. Let your mind travel with the breath. Two things happen. One is physiologically, when the breath slows down, the mind slows down. The other thing is, when your breath is balanced, the Sushumna opens, which is our highway to explore the higher levels of consciousness. Because the Ida and Pingala are balanced when you are balancing your breath and you are completely aware of the breath going in and out. Perhaps a time will come when you are one with that which is always aware of your breath, even if you are not. Perhaps. There is something which is aware of your breath, and when it decides your time has come, it just shuts it off. When you become aware of your breath, you are moving closer to that which is always aware of your breathing. The self, the inner self, of which we are generally not aware of. So, this is the beginning of pranayam. Now, there are many kinds of pranayam meant for various purposes. There is what is called hyperventilation. That is what we do with Bhastrika, with Kapalabhati. This, if you define it in one word, it's called hyperventilation. You fast, breathe, fast, and then stop for a while. Now what happens, you would think that the mind, the body, the lungs has lost its oxygen. No, it has taken so much oxygen that for some time it can remain without oxygen, minimum amount of oxygen, nothing will happen, and then again it starts breathing again. Now what happens is, with this, the body begins to be able to survive without too much of breathing. I don't know if any one of you have travelled to Kailash. The moment you go up a certain level, it becomes difficult to breathe. So people carry oxygen cylinders, portable cylinders, because in case there is an emergency, you can't breathe. I have gone to Kailash. Even in Dolmola Pass, which is 22,000 feet above sea level, something more actually, I did not have any problem with my breathing. Why? Because all these years doing Kriya, practice of breath, Pranayam, Kriya basically also is mostly Pranayam. I have developed the capacity to breathe with minimum of air. It is not necessary to have that much air to breathe, because the oxygen is built into the system, into the cells. It comes through practice for a long time, not in a day or two, but it happens. Abhyasa is important. And there are these Sherpas who travel with us, carrying the bag and so on. They have lived in these areas for so long that their genes have got adjusted internally to survive on less oxygen. They don't need that kind of oxygen which a normal chap from the plains needs. They can survive. They have no discomfort in that. But for others, they may require oxygen masks. Several of us who have been doing Kriya for a long time went up somehow without masks and came back. I was extremely happy, of course, but I don't know how. Most people were okay, I think. So, while the yogi develops the capacity to hold his breath and absorb oxygen, in the end he has also acquired the capacity to be without breath, because the prana begins to support his system without any need of breathing. Not for a long time, but for a short while. Now what happens when this happens is all the body's metabolism becomes less, but pranayam helps. So now the pranayam is a large subject. There are different kinds of pranayam. Again, coming to the scientific practical aspect of it, I would suggest that when you sit down and do your pranayam, there is one pranayam called Anulom Vilom, which balances your breath, the Ida and the Pingala, and that is to hold one nostril closed, take in through the other, hold for a while, exhale through this, inhale again, hold, exhale. Now, if this is done for about 5 minutes continuously, everything cools down and calms down. And then you will find that the breath that you take in is not so good, it's not so big, because even with a small breath, you are okay. Because there is enough oxygen in the system, it's been saturated. Plus, when the Ida and Pingala are balanced, then the prana has no way other than to move through the Shushumna, which is the central channel. When this moves with awareness of that breath that is moving through the central channel, the yogi's mind ascends to higher levels of consciousness and breaks through the 3 dimensions and goes beyond. And then you begin to understand really what consciousness is all about. You see it as yourself, you see it also as yourselves, other selves. Krishna describes beautifully in the Gita, saying the yogi is one who sees me in himself and himself in me and sees his own self in all other selves. What better expansion of consciousness is? And this is not mere speech or words, it's an anubhava, it's an actual experience. Now I am saying that when somebody does Anulom Vilom, again it's a good idea to keep them in laboratory conditions and check their brain waves. See what happens. I don't know what will happen, but we can try, can't we? I think we should at some point. And I am sure you can find somebody. I am okay, but this COVID thing has again come, second wave is going on. I was thinking of coming there, having a class with you all, becoming a guinea pig for a while, but now all this thing has started, so we can't move out anywhere. I can't go to Bangalore from Madnapalli, it's all closed, the borders are closed. The only thing we can do is keep ourselves safe with masks, with social distancing, and keep washing your hands and don't go out into crowds. These are the only ways possible that we can do. Because once it sets in, nobody knows how to handle it. When oxygen is there, not there, they are trying to give oxygen. What else can you do? And then there are medicines so that congestion is removed from the chest. That's all they are doing. They cannot do anything more than that. My suggestion is, if you do pranayama and yoga, and follow of course the medical precautions necessary, you will build enough immunity boosters in your system. Eat good food, proper food. Stop smoking first if you are smoking, because that gets into the lungs and interferes with everything. And if possible, I can't say anything about alcohol, because other day somebody was saying that a little bit of alcohol may be good for the throat, but we are dealing with the nose. If people who have alcohol, everything is an excuse, so we can't say anything to them. Anyway, Yeah, somebody's died, I'm drinking. Somebody's born, I'm drinking. Some celebration is going on, I'm drinking. We, we can drink internally at all times. We don't have to get the spirit in the bottle. Anyway, so the pointer today, what I was saying is, while we do all this, we should try and do some experiments on this, please, so that people can, even if they don't believe, they can understand something is going on, then slowly move into it. Anyway, the consciousness cannot be put in a test tube and demonstrated. This cannot be done. But the effect that takes place in the human system when you do the practices, these can be demonstrated and therefore make people to come closer to it. And all who attend this, I would also request you to read some of the works of Jung, Carl Jung, Jung. Carl Jung was a disciple of Freud, a student of Freud, but he deviated from him. And he has written a beautiful booklet on the chakras based on Sat Chakra Nirupana, serpent power. Based on that, he gave a series of lectures in London in the, which I forget the name of the society, it's to do with psychiatry with his guru. Beautiful lectures, and he talks about how this, even the symbols of the chakras have a certain context in the conscious evolution of the mind. So, for further research, I would suggest please do read this Carl Jung's. If you go into Google, today we have Google who knows everything. We can, no need to look for an omniscient guru now. We have Google at home. Set in and figure out where Jung is and what he is saying about the chakras and so on. So, today's session is over for the time being for today. Any questions? We have half an hour more to be discussed, we can do it. Philosophy, practical, psychology, anything. If I know, I will answer. What I meant was, there is an Upanishad called the Prashna Upanishad, where the disciples, three sons of three rishis, go to a guru, to another rishi, and they ask him, sir, we are the disciples of such and such illustrious rishis, sons. So, we have come to study the truth from you. This is the Prashna Upanishad. Prashna means question. And the rishi says something very interesting. He says, live with me for an year, he says. Be with me for 1 year. Now, when you say be with me for 1 year, it means two things. One, the teacher can watch the student and see what is the scope. In the end of it, you might say, I don't think this will work for you. You see the scope. And the other way around, the student can watch the teacher and see, well, this is going to work, or is he really what he is, or maybe he is a fake. 1 year. Usually we get bowled over in 10 minutes and then after it's too late to get out. So, live with me for 1 year, not you, I am just saying, this is what the Prashna Upanishad says, and the end of that, I will teach you, watch this, what the great Rishi is saying. At the end of this 1 year, I will teach you the truth if I know. So, I was just paraphrasing that when I said, if you ask me questions, if I know, I will answer them. That is what I meant. Anyone here in the who have any question?
Sir, if I may.
Yes, sir. Tell me.
This Dwija concept, I mean, and also as you shared that even Gopikrishna ji, based on his personal experience, was sharing that probably all the cells are reborn. I'm just curious. Could it be that the center of the consciousness, which was feeling a control of the body, that center shifts, and that's what the sense of reborn and realignment of cell that happens.
I do not know if that realignment of cells which Pandit Gopikrishna talked about is to do with Dwija. I do not know about that, but what he meant, he did not use that word, I am using this word. Dwija means born again, there are born again Christians and so on, born again. So, which means something is happening in which your direction of thought totally changes. See, it is usually going in one direction, it has suddenly taken a turn. In fact, since you discussed the cells, there is a phenomenon in the biology in the cell called mutation, a genetic mutation. Okay. Now, Darwin said everything is based on evolution and survival of the fittest, and now adaptation takes place according to, okay, fine. But then he also says that for some mysterious reason, some cells mutate, some of the genes mutate. Nobody knows why they are mutating, but they mutate. And when they mutate, the next of the species that comes from that seem to be different. This mutation happens for adaptation, of course, to the circumstances, but the mutation is not triggered by the circumstances, it is an internal trigger from the genes. That mutation changes the whole sequence for a while, and then there is a new species coming out from the old. Now, I think this mutation could be also happening when you touch the center of your consciousness, maybe. As you go closer to the center of your consciousness, so therefore this is a theory, I think every gene, now we are going into subjects which scientists will object to, biologists, every gene has the potential in its little microscopic capacity to touch the entire consciousness of the cosmos. There is something built in out there, it may be my theory. And so that if the proper chance happens and proper conditions are there, it can access the entire whole range of consciousness. I am only saying there is a potential there. Every gene, every cell, forget about the cell, every gene has built in potential. And when you see an extraordinary individual or an extraordinary creature or an extraordinary being, it did not come from outside, it came from the genes only. So, the genes have an extraordinary capacity to mutate and expand, and I am saying it is built in, and therefore, all of us potentially have the capacity to explore the infinite consciousness. It is there in our little cells. If you look at a cell in a microscope, cells we can see in the microscope, you can't see quantum things, but you can see cells. It is an interesting life, you see an entire cosmos working out there. There is a nucleus, whatever nucleus, what is it called? There is in the center there is something which controls everything. Then there are all those inside things moving around, some are eating food, some are excreting, and there is plasma all around, and the plasma is the main part of the cell, all other things are thin membranes. It is like here, even though there is a solid world, maximum what we have is space. Like this ultimate particle of matter, when you see an atom for instance, suppose I can see an atom, what you find there maximum is space. There is a tiny nucleus and there is a very tiny electron, but maximum what is there? Space. So, space is very important. Now, I am coming to this, that to understand something like eternal consciousness, the brain should have space. It does not have space because we have stuffed it with knowledge. I do not know how to put this now. If you will say, then should not we have any knowledge, should we be ignorant? I do not know, it is not that. What I am trying to say is, there is so much of what we call knowledge stuffed into our brains that there is no space for any mutation to occur. Now I am again on dangerous ground, but so emptying it is a process. Now, if emptying it is a process, the first thing to realize is that it should be emptied. That is where we should start with, right. So, when you say chitta vritti, it could also mean all this. Vritti need not necessarily mean a thought. Vritti is a modification, a ripple caused on the calm mind. Now, we have no other place to think of the mind other than the brain, at least at the moment. When you say mind, where does thought come from? The brain. I mean, at least to us, visibly. So, what you said in a way kind of applies. We need to work on this. You know, there is a lot of work to do in this matter, theoretically as well as there are some questions, I think, on the chat box.
Yes, sir. So Divyakanti Mishra has a question.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
So, sir, my question is that if it's very general thing that we should follow the routine of meditation
Yes.
in in a daily basis, and
Yes.
as it is time and space dependent.
Yes.
But sir, sometimes it's also difficult to follow that. Sometime, like very less times, for some time it's difficult. And so I wanted to know actually what is the real effect of that if some like at least one a month or once a month or twice a month it will delay that meditation routine. So what is the effect of that particularly, sir? I want to know, sir.
So, are you saying that you have some process of meditation which you are following and that you are not,
Sir.
it is not possible to practice every day, sometimes you miss it, this is what you are trying to say? Or
Yes, sir.
yes.
Sir.
So, what happened? Yeah. So, try to do this as regularly as possible, whatever you are doing. There are many kinds of meditation. So, whatever you are doing, try to do it regularly. Even if you miss it once or twice, it does not matter as long as you do not then stop it, you continue it. Okay? Just because you could not do another day, so oh, now I do not think this is going to work. No, catch up with it and continue to do the practice. Plus, we should, as we discussed, as you also shared with me just now, we should all get together. You know, the yogi, the Vedantin, the scientist, the person, creative person, we should all get, we should not think we are in different subjects, we are all in one subject, which is consciousness. If you are not conscious, you can't even do cellular biology. If I am not conscious, I can't talk to you. So, we are dealing with consciousness, which is a common factor. So, I liked your suggestion that we should all get together and share and try to cooperate and work together till we find that whatever we are seeking.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, please do not worry if you miss 1 or 2 days, it does not matter, continue your practice. Keep this in mind.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, sir.
yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yeah, this is Raju here,
Yeah, Raju.
and I'm joining in from Toronto.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask about the power of a mantra,
Oh,
and is it related to control of breathing? And if yes, how does it help in the rise of consciousness? And I refer to your, like say, oh, Swata Chaturvarenya Bhargo Devasya, the Gayatri mantra that you talked about last time. So that is an example maybe that I was reflecting upon.
Okay. So there are two subjects here. One is mantras and other is relationship of mantra and the breath. And yeah, so let me start with first mantras. Uh, Not that all mantras should be related and connected to the breath, not required. You can also, like when you chant the Gayatri, for instance, suppose you are initiated into the Gayatri and you are chanting the Gayatri, you would know when you do the entire elaborate chanting of the Gayatri, it is called Sandhya Vandan. And when Sandhya Vandana is done, there is a pranayam prescribed in it as part of the practice, which is basically Anulom Vilom. You breathe in through the left, you hold your breath, you breathe. You should see orthodox old people practicing Gayatri, you will see them doing all this. So you breathe in through the left, you hold your breath, you breathe out to the right, and then after your breath is balanced properly, then you start chanting the Gayatri. Now, therefore, that breath has a certain influence on the chanting. True, I agree with you. Now, but there is no specific breathing prescribed for Gayatri. You can even chant Gayatri without all that, but it will be a good idea to sit down for 2 minutes and do balance your left and right breath, what we call Anulom Vilom, and then start chanting the Gayatri. It will have a different effect altogether. Now, the effect of Gayatri, the prayer, while the sound has a certain effect, the meaning of a mantra also has a certain effect. The last part of the Gayatri is Dhyo Yon Aprachodayat, which means may my intelligence be stimulated, which means that the Upanishads and the ancients are not against intelligence, they are very much for intelligence. May my intelligence be stimulated. Nobody is asking us to put our intelligence in cold storage, no. The thing is, when the intelligence becomes stimulated and bright and subtle, then only it can discover the far reach of consciousness. A dull intellect cannot find that, because a really intelligent person very soon realizes the limitations of his intellectual capacities. Now, up to reach that, you need to stimulate you. It should be sharp. A sharp person with sharp intelligence quickly realizes my ordinary intelligence based on the 5 senses is not enough to explore that which is beyond. That discovery happens only when the intelligence is really sharp and stimulated, not when it is dull. So, the Gayatri mantra basically is to stimulate that in you, so that you can go beyond the ordinary and reach the highest state of consciousness. That is why the first sloka is Bhur Bhuva Swa, that means may it affect the Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka and Swargaloka. May my intelligence and understanding in all 3 realms awaken. Now, when you say Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka, Swargaloka, apart from the various realms that they are talking about, it also means the human mind. Bhuloka is the human state of wakefulness, and Bhuvarloka is the human state of sleep, I am sorry, dream. And Swargaloka is heaven, that is the human state of deep sleep, not even dreams, total sleep. This is heaven. What a heavenly sleep I had, some people say. This is Swarga. What is beyond is Turiya, which is not mentioned because it is understood. It is like the ringing of the bell. When you ring once, boom, it goes on for some time. See, did it stop immediately? No, it took some time. That taking of the time is the Turiya, is the higher state of consciousness. So, you are going from waking to dream to deep sleep to that which is beyond, which is called Turiya. So, all this is included in the Gayatri. It is only 3-4 sentences, but it is all included in that. This is mantra, and this is the connection between mantra and the breath as far as Gayatri is concerned. But there are other mantras which are not connected with breathing, but let us say you chant something from an Upanishad or from a Vedas, Gayatri for instance, one. Suppose you are chanting the Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay. Now, when you chant it, automatically a certain adjustment of breath takes place, even when you are not consciously breathing. You are not consciously doing pranayam, but the very act of the chant brings about a change in your breathing patterns. Yeah, that is why a chanting is done in a particular way, not simply you read something and chant. It is done in a certain, it is not like saying, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. No, that is a poem. Even that can be sung nicely, but that is different. But when you chant a mantra, it is different. The ancients have told us how to chant the mantra and what sound it should get, so on. So, that sound itself has effect on your mind which will raise you to the higher levels of consciousness. Like if you are chanting the Taittiriya, if you have to chant the Taittiriya Patha, the Shanti Patha which begins the Taittiriya, you can, it is not as if you say, Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavat Turiya Shan, no effect, even though the meaning is there. I bow down to that supreme, all that is there, but sound element is missing which controls your breath. So, how one who knows how to chant it? He would chant it saying, Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukrama Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayu Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ridham Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu tadvaktaramavatu avatu mamavatu vaktaram. Om Shanti. See, is there a difference? Or simply Channo Mitra Samvaruna? No. I chanted according to what they have marked on each of the words, the sound. When you do that, automatically the breath adjusts itself to a certain rhythm. And when that happens, it affects out, it affects in, and then you raise yourself from the lower consciousness to the higher, awareness of consciousness from the lower to the higher. I think this is all we can discuss right now. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So actually, I was trying to understand the way you were saying that the consciousness increases from the gross to the more subtle to the subtler, and I'm trying to understand how the consciousness moves from the gross to the more subtle realms.
Yes, sir.
But when I'm thinking in terms of when I'm meditating, then my consciousness is in my mind.
Yes.
And then if I put my attention down, then it goes down to the bottom to the Muladhara, then it will move up as I move up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there is the difference between the attention,
Mm-hmm.
the awareness, and the consciousness.
Yes.
And therefore now I'm confused when you say that the consciousness now will change from one.
I got it, I got it. You please note that nowhere have I said consciousness will change, I said awareness, not consciousness. Without consciousness we can't be aware, of course, but I am saying that the awareness goes from the gross to the subtle, not the consciousness. The consciousness is always subtle, it is never gross. I am saying our awareness, the mind as it is now, without having undergone a mutation or whatever we want to call it, the mind as it is now is aware of consciousness only at the grossest level, and therefore we need to shift our awareness from the gross to the subtle, not our awareness, not the consciousness. Consciousness is always subtle. So,
Got it.
this is what, usually people miss this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So you talked about spinal cord, which is an extension of our brain.
Yes.
And when we were doing EEG measurement, you suggested that we should also measure the spinal cord.
Yes.
Now, the question I have is, is it in the front part of the brain where you would expect some EEG signal, or is it, sorry, the front part of the body where you expect the EEG signal, or at the back side?
Back.
For the yogic text, back.
Backside. What I am saying is, just as for an EEG, they fix electrodes in the brain, right? I don't know, they fix here, there, somewhere. If you need to do that with the spine, I think the electrode should be somewhere in the spine at the back, not in the front. In the front also you might get some readings, because the plexuses are there, which come out from the sympathetic nervous system and join in the front, just behind the front part of our body. But I am talking about the back, the spine, the Sushumna, which is also called the Brahma Danda, the spine. So, if there is some way to put, but we have to do this very carefully. We should have neurologists working on this, because by some reason if that electrode goes somewhere wrong, then we are in trouble. So, we need to work. This is why I am saying we should all work together. Like this young lady Divya Kanti, who asked me, she is a cellular biologist, physicist, doctors, surgeons, neurologists, yogis. We should all work together. We shouldn't think that, oh, it all overlaps. Doctor, that's what I was trying to say.
So, other question I have is, you talked about turiya.
Yes.
Also, it is going beyond the sleep.
That's
So is
okay.
it possible to do those kind of experiments where you measure EEG of people who can actually achieve that kind of state?
That others should be able to do it, because I think in turiya they may not even be aware of what is going on in samadhi, outside world. So, if you get their permission and say, while you are in deep meditation, we are going to check you, and if it is okay, then it is possible to do that. I am sure there will be some changes reflected in the outer, what is it called? I don't know what it is called. When the internal stage is different, I am sure it will be reflected in the outer. Now, even cellular biologists can experiment and see if a person in deep meditation has any effect on the cells of the human body. This also can be tried. I personally think that this happens. Something happens, I am sure. You are no longer the same person. Either you are possessed or no, you are not possessed, but you are different.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, maybe we should stop now, ma'am. It is already 6:30. Can we wind up? Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much.